Hello and what is up, YouTube? My name is G3Iron and welcome to the much anticipated, long awaited League Starter Suggestions from yours truly, G3Iron. Today we're going to take a look at 4 different builds that I am going to recommend for you to consider as options for starting off with the upcoming 313 Ritual League and the Echoes of the Atlas expansion. Each and every one of these build guides that we are going to be taking a look at today are going to have links down below in the video description, so that way you can go and access all sorts of things like gameplay footage, path of building, updates, pros and cons, as well as comments from build guide creators and other players who have found these builds to be helpful for their league starts in times past. Without any further ado, let's jump into these 4 build guide recommendations.
They call me poacher and thief, clap me in irons and haul me like cargo into exile.
The very first recommendation that I'd like to make for you today is, in fact, a melee build. Oh, Iron, I can't believe you would recommend melee. Where's your Necromancer and your Summoner and all your minion stuff? No, melee. Ladies and gentlemen, I am forsaking the ways of necromancy and going the way of melee, at least in terms of making recommendations for you all to play. There is not a better option for league starting and then scaling and then taking down bosses with DPS and clear speed than TorsteinTheFallen's ultimate claw poison Pathfinder. I personally have played this build, have tested this build. This build is it is magnifique. It is so good. It can take a terrible, awful, geriatric, balding summoner player who is lazy and has terrible clicking mechanics and take me from a necromancer player into a melee player. That is just how darn good this build is. There's a wide spectrum of poison skills that you can use while you are playing this particular build. If you would like to play this build as a very, very fast mapper, for instance, there's options for you to do so, and Torstein does a great job of laying out those options. If you'd rather play this as a boss killer, which, hey folks, Echoes of the Atlas is going to be a very heavily boss kill oriented expansion, then you've got options for that as well. Regardless of whether or not you want to take on a high volume number of maps early on, or if you want to push deep, deep, deep into the Atlas in order to be one of the first people taking down top-end Conquerors, Awakeners, Cirrus, and even Maven herself, then this is going to be an exceptional starter for you to choose, and then to scale with all the various options that are going to be available to us in core Path of Exile, thanks to Harvest as well as Heist, both coming back into the core of PoE for 313. Those of you who are playing Trade League, I can personally vouch for Torstein. Torstein came by the stream when I was playing this particular build, and I was just using some trash gear. He gave me like some 10C value uniques, wasp nests, and it just absolutely took off, and the build was incredible. Those particular ones that he gave me that were valued at like 10C were because they were perfectly rolled and then perfectly corrupted with beast corruptions and everything. Like, that's like the top end most expensive way that you could get for those uniques, and wasp nests drop like flies all over the place, so you don't have to worry about, oh, playing a league starter that is dependent on a unique that you're not necessarily going to have access to. This is a fantastic build that has got reliable consistency over a long haul, and the guide is written with exceptional clarity to boot. If I was to make a league start suggestion guide for 313, oh wait, that's exactly what I'm doing, I would lead off with this build. This build is the creme de la creme of all melee options, and it's fast, and it can take down bosses. This is the #1 recommended build for this league start.
They were right to fear me. If only they had listened to their cowardice. Had they not taken my home with fire, I would not have taken their children.
Okay, did all the melee players leave yet? Okay, welcome. If melee isn't your thing, then maybe simply walking around and playing a clicking simulator or a walking simulator would be. If that interests you, if you'd like to play something that is relatively stress-free, that is relatively straightforward, and a guide that I personally believe is the second best guide written on the planet for a Path of Exile explanation guide. My personal rankings list, which I don't even know, I need to get that like on the wall somewhere here in the new office. My personal rankings for best written guides are Enki's Archwitch, and then right behind it, ShakCentral's Vortex for Dummies. If you're not sure about how a mechanic works, ShakCentral is going to use graphs, is going to use images, and is going to use language that is very helpful to be able to explain to you exactly how the mechanics of this particular build work, the options, and the particular variations that are available to you depending on whether or not you've got high currency, low currency, or league starter options to get kickstarted in your Vortex for Dummies occultist. Build is particularly strong and was particularly strong during Harvest, and of course Harvest is coming back in and is being reintegrated into 313 Ritual League, and so it's going to give us the option to basically run around. You can bind Vortex onto your move button, simply run around, click around, dropping vortexes and killing everything wherever you run, and then you just craft on whatever it is that you find, and away you go. You're going to have a great time. This is not only a strong build for mapping, it's not going to be the fastest build for mapping, but it is a strong build for mapping because oftentimes you have got so many layers of defenses, you are not going to find yourself simply dying repeatedly in maps due to a poor build choice. Then when it comes to taking on bosses, because you're dropping vortexes and all kinds of other DPS incentivizing sorts of skills around you, you stay relatively mobile during boss fights. That means as things get hectic with echoes of the Atlas and there are lots of bosses in a tiny confined space, you can maintain your mobility while also maintaining your DPS through Vortex. Exceptionally written guide, very well thought out build, and executable for even stupid geriatric old people like me. If I was to make a build recommendation video for the 313 Ritual League, this would come in as the number 2 recommended starter.
I may be in exile, but I will carve a road back to Oriath, one foe, one victory at a time.
Just to prove to you that I have gone absolutely insane, I am going to recommend not just one melee build for you, but 2. All right, folks, just like Billy Mays, but wait, there's more melee. X2644 has put together a beautifully written Impale Cyclone Slayer guide. Now, for those of you who hear those words come together, they don't necessarily sound all that sexy, all that groovy, all that jazzy. It's like, well, it's Impale, it's Cyclone, and it's Slayer. Like, those things don't exactly stand out as really niche or really interesting mechanics in terms of the layers of interactions that are there. If you're just looking for something that is solid, that's reliable, and that can scale with gear, then this is for you. If you're looking for special snowflake, winter orb, trickster, using all kinds of frenzy charges, get out of here. That's not what you're going to see here. This is the equivalent of Ye Old Faithful, all right? We know that this is a build that is incredibly strong. We also know that Slayer has gotten some pretty significant tweaks, changes, and even a couple of buffs along the way coming into the 313 patch cycle. This is going to be a very, very strong build for you to consider. Now, as soon as I heard about Echoes of the Atlas and about Ritual League and saw as many different kinds of bosses and as many kind of different encounters that we are going to be fighting in, I saw the arenas that we were going to be fighting in, and I saw, well, they're relatively small-ish. They're not too big. And if you remember, there have been leagues in the past where, depending on the league mechanic and depending on the size of the arena that you are taking things on, Cyclone oftentimes emerges as a dominant melee option, or taking off the qualifier about melee simply becomes a dominant option for an entire league. Killing a whole bunch of stuff in a relatively confined area is something that Cyclone excels at. Now, when you add on top of that improved culling strike with a whole bunch of monsters that have got a bunch of layers of HP, i.e. bosses from Echoes of the Atlas, well, now you've got a perfect recipe for league starting with a Slayer that is going to allow you to take down bosses faster on a budget with an improved amount of DPS and a strong layer of survivability thanks to Overleech. Impale in and of itself is still a very, very strong mechanic, and most of the nerfs that came towards Impale were either designed to nerf cluster jewels that were supporting minions, or direct nerfs towards the steal skills, which means that Cyclone is still out there. There's lots of options for you to get around the slowing effects of Cyclone, or even dealing with getting stunned since Cyclone no longer has stun immunity. There's lots of options for you to approach this particular build, and Dex 2644 does a great job of laying out those options so that way you know how you're going to overcome challenges that are going to come your way in the 3.13 Ritual League and Echoes of the Atlas. If I was to make a league starter suggestion video, this build would be my 3rd recommendation for you to try in the upcoming league.
The elements are my allies, the dead are my servants, and fear will be my closest friend.
Our 4th and final recommended league starter for you today is Gryph's Thirsty Archmage Cremation Necromancer. This is a wonderful build that simply, as the meme puts it, makes the Hierophant cry, because the Hierophant is no longer the king of being the Archmage. Now the Necromancer has got that title. You guys didn't think I was going to do a whole video without mentioning Necromancer, did you? Your games is basically going to have to remove the Necromancer Ascendancy from the game for me not to mention it during a League Start video recommendation list. You can scale up your damage as well as your layers of survivability very well with this particular build. Now, there's a couple of things that you're going to want to be aware of. There are a couple of crafts that are going to make this particular build much more powerful over the long run. For instance, there's some mechanics that you're going to want to have, including trigger socketed spell, whether that's you're unveiling that, a guildie is unveiling that, or you're purchasing that off of the market. Just be aware there are a couple of mechanics that you're going to need to read through in this guide before you make a decision to play this. I would not recommend that you league start this particular league start without reading through the guide first. A lot of players are going to try this build out, and because they haven't played an Archmage build previously, or because they haven't played a Cremation build previously, or because they haven't played a trigger-based build previously, they are going to end up confused, consternated, and simply overwhelmed at the ways in which to scale this build and what they should be looking for on their loot filters as they progress through the 10-act story and as they head into maps. So don't be like those players. Read through the guide, take a look at how you're going to scale your DPS, what it is that's going to be required from you in terms of endgame uniques, and what sorts of placement that you're going to have for some specific jewels on the tree and for some very specific setups, including a very nifty trick for getting enemies to be unnerved with a particular unique helmet choice. With all those caveats being said, if you want a build that doesn't have the biggest health pool, but just kills everything very, very quickly from the get-go, then this is going to be the build for you. Cremation is an absolutely wonderful boss-killing skill. You can stack multiple layers of cremation, and all kinds of projectiles are just going everywhere. No matter where a boss moves, they're going to be getting hit. They're going to be taking a bunch of damage. And so once again, if we're fighting bosses in a relatively tight or constrained area in like 1 to 1.5 screens worth of space, then Cremation is going to pretty much always be doing damage for you. Once you get a trigger set up going consistently, that means that wherever you move and wherever you cast, you've got damage going off while remaining mobile. So while you don't have the biggest health pool in the world, you're at least able to stay mobile and manually dodge whatever it is that you can see coming at you on your screen. If you like blowing stuff up and you like seeing bad guys die, then I highly, highly recommend you check out Gryph's Thirsty Archmage Cremation Necromancer as a fourth option for you to consider for a starter in the 313 Ritual League. Thank you so much for watching and for counting down all the days until League launch day. What is it that you guys are going to be playing during the 313 Ritual League start? Do you already have what you've got in mind picked out? Do you already have your path of building planned out? Maybe you've got a build guide that you're going to follow bookmark. Maybe you've got notes saved in path of building. Maybe you've got a couple of different live searches that are already set for items that you're going to be looking for. Leave us a comment down below with any suggestions, ideas, or builds that you're going to be playing on this upcoming 313 League start. And I hope that this upcoming League, 313 Ritual League, is the league that a Mirror of Calandra drops for you. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you'd like more information about our Patreon page or about any of our other discussions, feel free to check out the video description for more information. Thanks once again for watching, and big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters.